Lemon, lime, and a drop of cherry make a simple Shirley. But what happens when Tito's handmade vodka reveals this sweet sipper's dirty secret? Stir up a Tito's Dirty Sherlock and crack the case with Tito's at Tito'sVodka.com. 40% alcohol by volume, namely 80 proof, crafted to be savored responsibly.
Life can throw a lot your way in the morning. You might be battling drop-off times, while your kids are battling imaginary monsters or their shoelaces. But no matter what life brings, Life cereal puts a smile on everyone's face. With 24 grams of whole grains and unexpected sweetness in every serving, it's sure to please even the pickiest eaters. Help start your mornings with Life cereal.
I really love my life.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, these young women sought guidance from a counselor. She convinced them they were victims of abuse, even though they weren't. We'll review the podcast Dangerous Memories from Tortoise. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Hey, Kevin, guess what it is?
It is the last episode of September.
Yes, and you know what that means?
No, I have no idea what that means.
Put your earmuffs on, everyone. It's decorative gourd season, motherfuckers.
Oh. And that is a reference to an article that you love to reference every autumn.
It's from McSweeney's. This is my second favorite McSweeney's article of all time. Behind the column by the Baroness von Schrader from The Sound of Music, like from her perspective. Yes.
I think because you're the only person here who understands that reference, maybe you should put a link in so people will understand your inside joke.
We'll put a link in the show notes and newsletter, which, by the way, is free. You can get it at crimewriterson.com. Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of The Final Curtain, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca, and recent survivor of my 30th high school reunion.
Ooh.
Oh. And finally, our captain of all things cynical, author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Stranger Rivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, This is obviously Monday's podcast. What's coming up on Thursday's show?
On Thursday, we're going to be talking about the podcast from OPB. You know what that stands for?
Oregon Public Broadcasting.
Yeah, it's called Hush. And it's from host Leah Satilli.
Yay, one of our favorites.
Yeah. Hey, can I just take one more minute here to let folks know it's not too late to sponsor me for Wednesday's Walk a Mile Eras. This is the fundraiser I've been doing for several years where I put on a pair of high heel shoes and walk 1 mile.
No.
I swear to God, it's one full mile to raise money for the Crisis Center of Central New Hampshire. And I will say that, when they say walk a mile, when you think about that proverb, I say that I often use it to reflect on my privilege.
Yes.
That as a man growing up, I rarely, if never, had to consider whether or not I would get into a relationship with somebody who would be abusive. But I know that for many, many women, that is a reality. And so in order to be part of the solution, we all have to do what we can where we are. So if you can help us here in New Hampshire, I'd love for you to make a donation to the Crisis Center. The link is in the show notes. If you'd rather do something closer to where you live, then you should do that too. There are people there in need all the time. And these are emergency services that provide here in New Hampshire for families in need, whether that be emergency shelter, legal assistance, housing assistance. A little bit goes a long way. And I will say that as we are approaching game time, I am the number one fundraiser. I moved up from last week. I was number 4, and all you guys came to my aid. And right now I'm at number 1 with people creeping up.
How do we get you to maintain that top spot?
I think it's because I made a donation, Kevin.
Laura Bricker did make a donation, and I appreciate that, Laura. Yes.
Laura, I'm so excited.
I put him over the top.
That's right. She did. That was the lead change right there from Laura Bricker.
It was right there. And I'm getting a shirt for the Sasquatch Festival that is Sasquatch wearing high heels that look much like yours, Kevin, just in honor of you.
Oh, right. Bigfoot, yeah.
Kevin's been wearing the same heels every year. The fuchsia high heels. He looks fantastic in them for walking the faux mile. I'm going to walk again with you again this year, Kevin, I think, if I'm free. I think I will be. I'm going to free my schedule up.
That's great. I'm going to give you the phone. You can be the camera person. You can do the live stream.
Hopefully I won't do it the wrong orientation this time and then flip it halfway through so you're sideways.
Yeah, don't do that.
No, but we have to do vertical. Remember, we got to be vertical. Yeah,
absolutely. We'll be vertical.
All right.
So anyway, thanks, everybody. That's on Wednesday. And even if you're listening after Wednesday, we'll keep the donation link up. And it's never too late to do something, either here for us in New Hampshire or where you live.
It's a great organization. They make it possible for people to leave. And they make it possible for people in all sorts of situations to be supported. And it's a really fantastic organization.
Right. And it's not just a woman's issue. It's a family issue. It's an issue for everybody. And so that's one of the reasons why I continue to do it and reflect on what I can do to be part of the solution.
Now, Kevin, I'm turning from something altruistic to something as important. Well, not really.
Okay.
But I'm going to frame it that way. Laura?
Yes.
Were you the most attractive person at your 30th high school reunion? How many people were there? Like 4?
So we have a class. We had 36 people in our class.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
10 showed up.
Okay.
That's not bad. It's a,
30-something%.
20-something% turnout.
Yeah. So this one girl now, her fiance has this lovely, he owns like convenience store supply business.
Ooh,
so he has this big warehouse where he's all this stuff. But at their garage, at their house, they have like an industrial size, like ice maker. And then they have like a iced coffee dispenser, like you would see if you went to Cumberland Farms. And then they had like a professional grade pizza oven.
I love this. Ooh, do they have one of those things where there's just hot dogs spinning on a hot like tray under behind a thing of glass, like forever all day?
No, there was not that. And I was
this
like,
a 7-Eleven?
That's what it felt like. I was like, can I just come stay in your garage? And they're like, well, the teenage boys are upstairs in the spank bank. I'm like, I don't want to go in the spank bank. What? I think I'm all set with that.
Okay.
But yeah, no, it was very interesting. 30 years. 30 years. And not much has changed in Vermont.
One last question, Laura, before we move on. 30th reunion. You're 50. Were you 20 years old when you graduated from high school?
I'm 48.
Yeah, what is the matter with you?
Oh, you're not 50. All right, no matter.
50.
You turned 50. Oh, you had the 48th birthday.
I turned 50 this year, Kevin.
That's it.
Yeah,
All right.
I would have heard all about some elaborate thing I'm doing. Like, I don't know what I wanted to ride a snowmobile across a water crossing when I turned 50, but that got shut down. So
you haven't turned 50 yet. How did that get shut down?
Well, I was pitching it that I was going to get some lessons, and my friends were like, "We don't think that's a good decision for you."
Yeah.
No.
You can't ride a snowmobile for your birthday in September.
No.
Well, it's you ride it across a pond and do pond skimming on it.
Yeah.
No.
That sounds bad.
That sounds bad.
It sounds adventurous, Toby. It's adventurous.
It sounds like a bad idea. I have right now, I'll just say this and then we can review the podcast reviewing. I don't really have a lot of friends from my high school days just because I lost touch with everybody, but I'm friends with a lot of them on Facebook, and that's how, I've actually become like reconnected with a few of them. And there's this one girl, you can think of them as girls because you knew them when you were little kids, and we were best friends when I was like in 1st, 2nd, 3rd grade, but then we weren't really friends in high school, but we're friends on Facebook now. She is hands down the biggest spreader of disinformation of anybody I have ever seen on social media. I've never seen anything like it. The people that they make fun of for like the kind of disinformation they spread, she's like that, like times 50. And I'm like so tempted, if it were anybody else, I would just unfriend. But because this is someone I sort of know, like I kind of want to see it because I'm like, I don't know where this, we like grew up in the same place, knew all the same people. Like, I don't know what happened to you. Like, I'm just like, and I'm kind of always curious to see like, what's the disinformation out there? So I feel like I have a window into getting it first.
Is her name Fipsi?
No, but I heard about Springfield, Ohio before a lot of other people did from this woman's Facebook page. Yeah. It's
thank
wild.
God you had that useful information,
Rebecca. Yeah. Okay. All right. By the way, Kamala Harris might not be black or Indian, as it turns out, is a thing that I'm learning today.
Oh, from Fipsi. That's awesome. Oh, Fipsi. Yeah.
No, from this woman, KM, that's all I'll say. All right. Well, we have a podcast we need to review. Speaking of interesting young people, should we go ahead and get that done?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's get that done. Leading off.
This woman led them to believe astonishing things about their families and about the social circle that they grew up in. Things that would destroy years of these young women's lives and the lives of their families too.
A young woman from a posh English family sought clarity about her sexual orientation from therapist Anne Craig. She convinced Fipsi her issues were a result of childhood abuse at the hands of her family, abuse Fipsi had no recollection of. Anne convinced her to cut ties with them and focus instead on their sessions.
Always through destroying the happy relationship that I had with them. And she would find a way to poison that. And I was so vulnerable, I just took it.
Anne diagnosed most of her well-to-do patients as victims of an underground pedophile ring. The women spent years estranged from their families. It left their parents convinced and brainwashed their daughters and unsure of how to get them back.
And she walked down the steps, got onto her bicycle, and I said, Huey, don't cut me out of your life. Don't cut me out of your life. And she bicycled away, and that was the last time I saw her in 6 years.
The podcast Dangerous Memories from Tortoise explains the work of the self-styled counselor who convinced women of privilege they were victims and lured them into isolation and dependence. Host Grace Hugh Hallett talks to former clients and their families about Anne's cult-like hold on them and the efforts to stop her. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from Dangerous Memories. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to hear our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So, Toby, this therapist, Anne, gives some pretty spot-on advice, like practical life advice, don't you think?
Yeah. I mean, she's able to get her therapy patients to a point where they don't even need to wear bike helmets anymore, apparently.
Yeah.
When they go biking. It's all set.
They're doing the work, Toby.
Yeah, I think that's the point at which you should be questioning whether who you're going to is actually a therapist or whether she might be something more diabolical.
Yeah.
Like a cult leader.
So, Kevin, can you talk about that? Because this isn't like your traditional cult story, right? I mean, it's not like there are things about it that ring familiar, but not really, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly cult adjacent behavior. I know towards the end, there's an expert who says like this is definitely a cult, but it just seems to me like sort of the only difference is that this is a collection of individuals as opposed to like a group. Like all together, but the control is the same, and the need that these people need to separate themselves from family and other, people who are gonna, what is the term that the Scientologists use?
Oh, the suppressive people.
Suppressive people. You gotta get rid of them, and as far as like the actual therapy, I mean, anyone can cosplay being a therapist. And, say, well, whatever fucked up thing you wanted to do, jumping jacks or whatever, it's going to be a benefit to some people, right? Because in real therapy, you're the one doing the real work, right? The therapist might just sort of be guiding you or whatever. But as long as you're the one, like, attempting to do something, you may get something out of it, So, like, the dream analysis and the left-handed journaling to these patients, to Fipsi and Huey and the other ones, at some point it may appear like it is producing results, quality results or whatever. And that sort of reinforces the perception that this is beneficial. And then, when you get to Anne's particular therapy, it certainly required a lot of her active involvement, explaining to you what your dreams meant. And that's like sort of where the isolation and the dependence, grew out of.
You know what this woman reminds me of, Laura, is Nancy from NXIVM. Because she comes from this like corporate background, right? Where she was like a corporate consultant who like worked in companies and like HR or whatever that she did.
HR.
And like helped people with their like change consulting or whatever. And wasn't that Nancy's job? Like she did change management consulting and stuff. She had no therapy background. But you have a note that was something I was thinking about this whole time. Because part of the reason this podcast is both interesting And also, part of the reason it was made, I think, and maybe wouldn't have been made otherwise, is because it's a bunch of fancy, rich young women who were targeted by this woman. What are your thoughts about that?
That was something, as I was listening to this, I was like, okay, if it wasn't Flopsy, Mopsy, and Cottontail that this was happening to, I'm sorry.
Excuse me?
But like, seriously, let's flip this. If this was happening to poor women in some sort of a city, they were going to like a community mental health program where this was happening, would anybody do anything about it? No, the outrage that it was happening to these women from these like well-to-do, well-heeled families that were people that this sort of thing just didn't happen to. I felt like that was largely why this even got the level of attention that it did. Like if you look in any of the UK tabloids, which you know that I love, they like make a point of dropping in the names of like Lord Lady so-and-so who's a relative of this one or that one and everything. And I found myself thinking, honestly, like these wealthy women, who by the way, all sound exactly the same. So I don't even know which one is talking when. It was very hard for me to be like, which one are we listening to now? Their stories are all the same. And in the beginning, honestly, I'm like, this is just like some new agey bullshit. Like we're going to like write something on a piece of paper and we're going to burn it. Like that's not really that far out of bounds. But I felt like, I don't want to call it a double standard, but like sort of like, I guess just think about it from the other perspective. Would we have heard about this if the mother of the one woman didn't get as riled up about it as she did? That her daughter was, cutting contact and not having something to do with her. And these were people that had the resources to do something about it. People that don't have resources wouldn't have been able to do anything about this.
Before we'd even put our bags down, she was offering us plates of homemade cheese biscuits. The biscuits were followed by a lunch that she and her husband Henry had made for us. Cold pea soup, pheasant stew, wine, and pavlova. All laid out beautifully at a large garden table on the terrace.
And then this table.
There's also, by the way, on the one hand, like my journalism hackles are sort of like, yeah, I mean, it is kind of, in one hand, not great to only tell stories about like these rich upper class people. On the other hand, it's a great scene to go to somebody's mansion and be served a cream tea while you're reporting on them.
Yes.
It's a world that we don't usually get into. And to be able to talk to parents who can hire a deprogrammer who gives them all this advice about how to like approach their daughter who's like in this cult-like situation, and you get to hear what a professional would say.
That they flew over their latest like
Rule
tea and
number
crumpets
one,
or whatever.
Leave the door open. Rule number two, it's just, there is something there that like, and it's gross. It's a gross thing to say, but it is a world, right? I mean, Toby, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of wonder how many of these things there are. Like, are there like a lot of poor and middle class women who are being taken in by these kinds of scams? Like, I don't know. Like, this seems like kind of an anomaly to me.
Well, there's LuLaRoe, Toby.
Yeah. Well, I was just surprised. I mean, in addition to the fact that would it have gotten any play if it was poor women or women who weren't royal connected or royal adjacent or whatever, the fact that they were all willing to participate to this degree, despite the fact that they absolutely could have gotten away with not doing it and probably actually had their parents like I mean, the libel laws in England are such, I think, that if you don't want a story put out there, you can really intimidate people into not doing it. So I was impressed by how sort of open these women of privilege were. And they were already making these weird decisions for somebody with that kind of privilege. I mean, they were artists, and I think they were kind of like cosplaying being starving bohemian artists by living in a bar that had been shut down and stuff. And it doesn't seem like they were like having to like pee in the alley or anything like that. But they weren't like staying at the mansion.
I love the woman, by the way, who cut herself off from her trust fund, right?
Yeah.
As if her family wouldn't like just let her have it again if she chose to, right? Yeah.
So, I mean, I think I found the whole idea of them participating in this kind of interesting. And I would have been interested a little bit if the host, because she talks at one point about how I got into this because I thought it was really interesting that people like me were involved in this story.
Right.
And I was kind of wishing that she would reflect a little bit upon is the fact that she is like them, make it easier for them to talk to her. Like, we all sort of are from the same class. We probably went to the same handful of schools. We've had similar experiences. If it had been somebody else from, some other newspaper or whatever who'd gone and talked to them, would they have been as open with somebody who they didn't share sort of this common background and I guess age with? But I thought that was an interesting part of this whole thing, was the way class played out, both sort of in a very upfront way when they start figuring out what Anne's deal is, but also kind of between the lines with how these women talk, how it's covered, sort of this class camaraderie, I guess, maybe between the subjects and the reporter.
Yeah, someone posed the question, like, would we be hearing about this if these were working class folks? Now, in UK, what they call middle class is what we would in the US consider upper class, but the class system is something we're not familiar with, really in America in the same way. And that says something. But, the whole reason that, not necessarily that this is why the story was told, but this is why the scam apparently went on, because the targets were posh people. It seemed like it was more than just what united the victims was that background. That seemed to be an important part of the case. At the end, I thought it was really fascinating that they raised this question, or at least when they're talking about why would she do this, when they're looking at motivations, that her whole class resentment thing came up. And I was like, wow, tell me more about that.
And I think she felt that sexual abuse, paedophilia, these were things that were rampant in the upper middle classes. The idea of sort of upper middle class people getting away with something seemed to be something that was very much high in Anne Craig's mind.
I wish I'd heard this sooner. I felt like like I would have gotten something more out of the story if this had been posed. And again, they don't declare this is the motivation, this is the reason why. But if that sort of thing had been posed, that maybe this was one of the things that had motivated her, or that was why these particular patients were targeted, it would give me something to watch for as we're going through this story, as opposed to sort of being somewhat of a blank space and you're trying to figure it all out for yourself. That kind of context, I think, would have really kind of drawn me in a lot closer to be listening to what's going on. And I think at some point we got to talk about sort of the common thread of the diagnosis that you're all part of this pedophile ring, which I think, opens up a whole other bit of hypothetical discussion about why that was that.
Well, we'll always draw you in with something interesting on our Patreon, right, Kevin?
Oh, my goodness gracious.
Yes, we will, because right now we're in the business section, and we're going to talk about our Patreon. Kevin, what do we got going on back there?
I was going to try to pivot away from the class structure, but let's talk about our Patreon. But
you don't have to go to a fancy uni. Or a public school, as they call non-public schools over there, to join our Patreon.
You don't have to flit about Europe pretending to be an artist.
No, you don't have to have cream teas every day.
You don't.
You can just be a regular person.
You can join us at patreon.com/partners in crime media. We get all sorts of exclusive content, including the Crime Writers on After Show. Guess what we're talking about this week? The big controversy in journalism and the big ethical discussion on whether or not it's okay for journalists to sleep with their sources.
Or have any kind of romantic relationship with their sources.
And surprisingly, there are two sides to the story, apparently.
Oh my God. Are there?
Well, someone's making the case. We'll see where Laura and Toby come down on this.
Yeah, looking forward to that.
Other great exclusive content that we have include Rebecca's ongoing look at the Karen Reed case and the Readathon in the latest episode.
Canton, man. Fucking Canton.
Yeah. Rebecca will give some of her context about the appeal that was filed in Massachusetts, and also what happened to all those police officers who were accused of wrongdoing. What kind of punishment did they get?
Very severe punishments. Not.
Another great thing is Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Toby recently had a discussion about the book The Wager, and he's already knuckling down to talk about the next book. Tell us, Toby, what's coming up on the bookshelf?
The next book is called The Sullivanians, and this is actually, ironically, a good episode to be talking about it, because it is about a sort of cult commune run by a psychotherapist in New York City back in the 70s, I believe.
Very interesting.
There's been a lot of talk about it. Got a cool panel. And you've got some time because we're not going to be recording until early November, but then we're going to be following it up pretty quickly with the next book. So you might want to do what I do, and it's get ahead.
Definitely get ahead. And another great exclusive podcast includes Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast. And Laura, in the next episode of Leave It to Bricker, you're going to tell us about your journey to the Exeter UFO Festival.
Yeah, we've got two really exciting ones. So the UFO Festival podcast is out. And then after that will be my trip to the Sasquatch Calling Contest in upstate New York.
Yeah, get in the paranormal.
I'm staying in the Sasquatch cabin.
Can't wait to hear that. And also we have another exclusive podcast that's called Married with Podcast, in which Rebecca and I dole out relationship and parenting advice. In the last episode, we talk about a situation in which a listener's stepson overstepped and made an invitation to the house that maybe somebody that maybe he shouldn't have. And speaking of projection, Rebecca's answer was that it was the husband's fault.
No, that's not what I said.
You said the husband was responsible.
No, I didn't.
All right, so
oh boy.
Oh boy.
Got to tune in to find out.
By the way, this is pretty much the dynamic of how that answer went.
Who's the reliable narrator here?
Yeah, well, you'll just have to tune in to find out. So, again, all sorts of great stuff there. You're helping sustain us and, these podcasts and our ability to sit around and listen to all sorts of stuff and then do these reviews. We can't do that without the assistance, not only of our advertisers, but really of our patrons, and we appreciate you.
That's right. How do you think we have all the time to listen to all these podcasts and then review them? This is a lot of work.
We have help from AI.
It's so much work. All right, Kevin, does thus end our business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. Kevin, who's sponsoring us right now?
Okay, we're brought to you by Quince.
Quince?
Yeah, hey, we're into fall right now, and it's back to school, and so all those short shorts, tank tops, all those, cool linen clothes that would be those are all going in the closet. You got to get ready for
it's cashmere sweater time.
It's cashmere. If you're going to go out and get decorative gourds, miniature decorative gourds,
decorative gourd season.
Yes, that's right. You got to shift your wardrobe. Luckily, Quince offers timeless and high quality items that you'll adore, ensuring your wardrobe stays fresh and you don't blow your budget. And remember, all Quince items are priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands.
Yes, they sure are. I love Quince so much, Kevin.
Yeah.
I was actually shopping on Quince earlier today on my phone while I was editing something. Mm-hmm. There's something I want so badly.
Tell me.
It's a cashmere cardigan. Of course it is. It's so cute.
But does it break the bank?
No, of course it doesn't break the bank.
Then I'll allow it.
Oh,
I will allow it.
Thanks for allowing it.
Quince only works with factories that use safe, ethical, and responsible manufacturing practices, along with premium fabrics and finishes. How awesome is that?
Make switching seasons a breeze with Quince's high-quality closet essentials, like a cropped cashmere sweater. Go to quince.com/crime for free shipping on your order and 365-day returns. That's QUINCE.com/crime to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime.
Hey, everybody. It's Rob Lowe here. If you haven't heard, I have a podcast that's called Literally with Rob Lowe. And basically it's conversations I've had that really make you feel like you're pulling up a chair at an intimate dinner between myself and people that I admire, like Aaron Sorkin or Tiffany Haddish, Demi Moore, Chris Pratt, Michael J. Fox. There are new episodes out every Thursday. So subscribe, please, and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Lemon, lime, and a drop of cherry make a simple Shirley. But what happens when Tito's handmade vodka reveals this sweet sipper's dirty secret? Stir up a Tito's Dirty Sherlock and crack the case with Tito's at Tito'sVodka.com. 40% alcohol by volume, namely 80 proof, crafted to be savored responsibly.
Life can throw a lot your way in the morning. You might be battling drop-off times, while your kids are battling imaginary monsters or their shoelaces. But no matter what life brings, Life cereal puts a smile on everyone's face. With 24 grams of whole grains and unexpected sweetness in every serving, it's sure to please even the pickiest eaters. Help start your mornings with Life cereal.
I really love my life.
So, Laura, before the business section, you had some thoughts about class and this podcast and being drawn in or not by it. What were you about to say?
I wanted to piggyback on what Kevin was saying about like having some context of something that we're like, oh, okay, now we understand why we're listening to this podcast. I think that was my frustration through like the 4th episode. I'm like, okay, are we listening because Huey commits suicide? Are we listening because somebody's family fortune got stolen? Are we listening because Anne killed somebody? I'm like, why?
Are you sad that those things didn't happen?
Well, no, I was kind of like, I'm like listening and I'm like, okay, so she's not a great therapist. She's doing some questionable stuff. It's not as culty as some of the culty stuff we've listened to. And I'm like, so I was waiting for like that sort of context of like, what is the reason for this? And then I was
think
like,
what you want to say, Laura, is what are the stakes?
What are the stakes? Yeah, there was no stakes. I'm like listening. And then I think it was the end of episode 4 where they're finally like, oh, and P.S. anybody can hang a shingle and be a therapist in England. I'm like, that's a story. Maybe that should have been in the first episode. And then at the end, I'm like, oh, so Huey's alive? Wait, she didn't steal the family fortune? Okay, so...
She didn't even ask for a lot of money.
Yeah, so I guess I was just kind of wondering, like, you can Google this story and read all about it in my favorite publication, the Daily Mail. So I was kind of wondering, like, what stakes, that's a good word, Rebecca, like, what is it that we're listening to this for that we're supposed to be taking away from this, aside from just, like, this shitty therapist experience?
We should probably clarify that you like the Daily Mail in an ironic way, Laura Bricker. So
I
that
do.
People don't think you're an insane person.
No, I like the Daily Mail because no matter what happens, you can go read an article in the Daily Mail and you'll be like, whoa.
Yes.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's like the Inquirer, but like weirder and different. So tell me, what did you think of this whole notion that this fake therapist, Anne, was getting people to do this automatic writing and then burn their thoughts and all of the stuff that they were writing down and their stories, their dreams? What did you make of all that?
That was an interesting thing because given all the other stuff that they're also doing, like, I think that's one of the things that you could potentially say, like, this might have some kind of therapeutic value. I don't think automatic writing actually does. Like, I don't think the idea that you're writing with your offhand is going to allow you to somehow, like, break through some kind of mental blocks or whatever. Like, it wouldn't be the first time that somebody burned something they wrote as some kind of, like, ritualistic cleansing of that thought or that deed or whatever. So it seemed like the kind of thing that you could, in that situation, kind of convince somebody is part of their therapy, right? In a podcast that I generally liked a lot, she seems to think that it's part of like destroying evidence. And I guess it gets talked about a few different times. And that just seemed kind of off to me. I mean, of all the things, like the fact that you wrote something in your left hand about your life doesn't seem like it's that big a deal. So I don't know. I thought that it was interesting. And I think it's sort of a new agey type thing, is this idea of automatic writing.
Yeah.
Anne is clearly aware that what she's doing way oversteps the bounds of therapy, right? And she doesn't want them mentioning her when they go to the hospital, for instance.
So you'd write with your left hand so quickly that it's just squiggles, but it's your thought process. So squiggle, 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 and all the thoughts pouring out. But that's where information would come or answers would come, or you'd work something out because you're not thinking, you're just free flow writing.
The thing is that there's some issues and this stuff is malicious, right? I mean, it's not done out of like, I was trying to be a good therapist and it turns out I suck at it. It was I'm going to take a piece out of these, posh girls.
I just want to let everybody know that while you were talking, Rebecca took her left hand and started writing on her tablet, and it came out and said, "I hate Toby. Laura sucks," and spelled with an X.
That's right.
And then she erased it.
I had no control over it. It was my left hand.
Ambidextrous?
It was my left hand. I had no control.
Then you have to write with your toes, Laura.
All right. So are you going to now burn your iPad?
I just erased it with the magic eraser part.
That doesn't count.
So Kevin, what's the deal?
It doesn't count.
What is the deal, you think, that everybody is part of this big pedophile ring and that everybody had to have been sexually abused? Everybody.
Yeah. I mean, talk about unlucky.
Yeah. Everybody. Every single
Everybody.
I have
But
zero memory of
the
this.
same ring,
The same ring diagnosed everybody. I know that you don't remember it and that you're sure it didn't happen to you, but I assure you it did.
And here's the title, right? The fake memories, and they're being, implanted and whatnot. And I think maybe there's, like you mentioned earlier, legal reasons, libel reasons that didn't dig deep into this, but it kind of seemed obvious to me, we talk about why that particular diagnosis, you're a victim of a pedophile ring. It seems very much like some kind of projection. I can't say that Anne is projecting, but I will say that when I hear that, I think of a person who may be projecting their own victimhood because it keeps coming up and up and up and over and over. I can only guess that if she grew up in Ireland at a certain time and if she were victimized, that she might feel really alone. She might feel like this has never happened to anybody else, right? The language around this has changed since then. But I think that I would imagine that somebody like that would have a desire to draw other people in to sort of validate their experience and maybe recruit people into the same victimhood so that they're all sharing the same thing. And it seems it's not enough to just say it was a relative, it was a stranger down the street. It was a huge pedophile ring and make it bigger. There's a reason for making it bigger and organized.
But it was your parents. But isn't it just a way to isolate you from your family too?
Sure, yeah, it does both.
It could be that too, but I agree with Kevin. I think that was, as I was listening to this, I was like, okay, this therapist. I mean, a lot of people get into being a therapist because they've gone through their own stuff, and then you often hear about that. But I'm thinking she had some unresolved shit that she never dealt with, and she's just projecting on these people. And I kept thinking, like, what is her actual real background? What is her actual origin story? Because that's why she's doing this. But she is alienating them, Rebecca. It was like cult-like, but it was also like parental alienation that you see in like the court system when they plant memories and do things like that.
One of the wildest attempts at that we hear is when we hear the story about when one of them was a kid and they lived in another country. And the camera story where it was like she brought the camera to school to give to the teacher to try to curry favor with the teacher, and the teacher didn't want to give it back. And Anne was like, well, that's because, they want to give it back because your mom wanted it back so badly because there were photos on there that your mother had taken, pedophilic photos that your mother desperately needed back because the teacher was going to find out about all the, and it's like, that was just nuts.
Yeah, I guess I had a slightly different take on the whole thing, which is that I kind of saw it as sort of like the class conspiracy type stuff, which is like the upper classes, like they're pedophiles and they have all these other amoralities, and coming from like, I guess, from an Irish family that resented the British and it apparently, especially the British upper class. And she has this weird thing where she kind of both hates them, but also aspires to live like them. At the time when I was listening, I was like, man, she freaking hates the British aristocracy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't know particularly, but it wouldn't surprise me if there's a lot of conspiracy stuff around, because the British like pedophilia is like, just in my experience, it seems like it's even more of a zeitgeist issue in Britain than it is in the US.
I feel like the Venn diagram on these things might like be overlapping on some of it. And it really isn't until the end, guys, right? Sort of like where they ask, they say they asked all of the people, well, what do you think motivated her? That's like the last question. And we get this whip around of sort of everybody's take. And a lot of this comes up. And again, it sounds to me like their narrative decision was to let everybody come to their own conclusion before dropping some of this stuff in. And that's certainly one good way of doing it. And I think I would have preferred to be given some context to think about different things, although I don't think either way is wrong.
What do you think it was that motivated Anne?
I think it was a power thing.
Entrap and control people.
It is certainly not unusual for it to happen, and I think sometimes they just enjoy the power.
Driven by their personalities and the needs of those unhappy and unhealthy personality types.
It sounds to me like she's overcoming her own trauma and trying to make everybody else join her club.
We hear near the end, one of the women gets some distance, right? But she's still willing to be in touch, right, with Anne. But she just says, listen, why don't we just behave more like regular people where I have a few days away, and then when we talk, we just catch up. Like, we don't have to talk every single day. We'll just, have a weekly conversation, and I fill you in on what's been going on, and you fill me in on what's been going on. We have the same kinds of conversations, just not as frequently. And Anne flipped the fuck out, right? Doesn't that speak to, like, in some ways, like, that's the culty stuff, like the Keith Raniere? No, it has to be all the time. It has to be overnight. It has to be volleyball. It has to be like this. You have to be in my sight all the time. It's like that super intense, sometimes way too, like, even like with those unhealthy, toxic friends with no bound, those bad boundary kind of situations. Like, if it's not their way, like, it's wrong. It's like, it speaks to that. And the thing about, like, the whole sex abuse thing is it binds you to me, because if I've convinced you this happened to you, this horrible thing, then, like, I am the only person who you can talk to about it, because it's also this horrible amoral secret.
Right. And if she's not motivated by money,
no,
she's
weirdly
motivated, I think, by the control. And that's what she's getting out of these different relationships.
We're just surprised here she's also married and, like, has, like, a regular life. Like, I was like, how does she have time to be married when she has all these relationships with all these women?
I don't know. The husband seemed to kind of know a little bit what's going on. I mean, it seemed like he didn't know, like, what was going on, but he certainly got wind of, like, what she's capable of.
Hey, everybody, it's Rob Lowe here. If you haven't heard, I have a podcast that's called Literally with Rob Lowe. And basically, it's conversations I've had that really make you feel like you're pulling up a chair at an intimate dinner between myself and people that I admire, like Aaron Sorkin or Tiffany Haddish, Demi Moore, Chris Pratt, Michael J. Fox. There are new episodes out every Thursday. So subscribe, please, and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Lemon, lime, and a drop of cherry make a simple Shirley. But what happens when Tito's handmade vodka reveals this sweet sipper's dirty secret? Stir up a Tito's Dirty Sherlock and crack the case with Tito's at Tito'sVodka.com. 40% alcohol by volume, namely 80 proof, crafted to be savored responsibly.
Life can throw a lot your way in the morning. You might be battling drop-off times, while your kids are battling imaginary monsters or their shoelaces. But no matter what life brings, Life cereal puts a smile on everyone's face. With 24 grams of whole grains and unexpected sweetness in every serving, it's sure to please even the pickiest eaters. Help start your mornings with Life cereal.
I really love my life.
A project with so much potential, a unified and successful team, but then chaos, missed deadlines, no communication, and a trail of digital tumbleweeds. This wasn't just any project failure, folks. This was the case of the collapsed collaboration. But there's a way to rewrite this story. Monday.com can illuminate any project, assign tasks, track progress, and share files and updates, all in one place, with no mysteries. Tap the banner to go to Monday.com.
All right, let's let our listeners know, should they check out the podcast Dangerous Memories? It's a podcast from Tortoise. Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this podcast?
I'm going to go thumbs sideways on this podcast. I struggled with this podcast because I'm you know what? I'm even going to go mild thumbs down on this podcast. I'm going to be totally honest with you. I was trying to be nice. No, I'm not going to lie.
That's okay. Laura, you let your thumbs down fly.
Don't let Anne affect your decisions.
Anne is telling me to write burn things. And I love to burn things. Oh God. Anyway, carrying on. So I think what I struggled with this podcast was that I felt like I needed more of some sort of reason besides the fact that we had access to the people that had this woman as a therapist, like some sort of a reason that I was listening to it. I didn't feel any sort of suspense to listen to the next episode. It was like the first 4 episodes I was listening and I was like, what's happening? Okay, we're hearing from these people. I'm not feeling particularly invested at this point because I don't feel like something super egregious has happened in the first 4 episodes. And I just felt like I wanted something more to kind of latch onto to make me want to listen to this podcast. I felt frustrated that I don't think we would have heard all of this story if this had happened to a different class of person. And, I get fired up about injustice for people who often aren't heard from. And in this case, I was like, these aren't typically the people that wouldn't have their voices heard. So, and this is just a little thing. And I know we don't usually talk about people's voices, but I also had a very hard time distinguishing like who was talking when, because a lot of the voices were very similar. And I was like, are we listening to a reading from a journal right now? Is this the person right now? Is this another person right now? So I kind of, at that point, I had a hard time. I wish there was more signposting throughout this to sort of really differentiate some of these characters, because they did start to sound very similar and blend together. So mild thumbs down.
That's not a criticism of voices, Laura. That's a fair.
But I will say, if I was putting this on as an audiobook at night, which I sometimes do to sleep, the voices would be very soothing. Very soothing for me and probably help me drift off.
Yeah. Toby Ball, what about you? Thumbs up or thumbs down for Dangerous Memories?
Yeah, this is a very posh podcast. There's more poshness in this than we usually get. I liked it a lot, actually. I thought it was super interesting. They have sort of extensive interviews with two of the people who were victims in this. I thought sort of both the overt and sort of between the lines class stuff that goes on in this podcast was super interesting. Yeah, I found it compelling just about all the way through. I think there's some questions about, like, to me, it seems like a cult, but other people, it seems sort of cult adjacent. It's a sort of a different take on things that we've looked at before about sort of coercive control, manipulating people's perceptions of their families, of their own histories, implanting false memories, things like that. Yeah, I liked it quite a bit, so I'm a pretty solid thumbs up.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah, I'm also going thumbs up. The story beats are familiar because we have heard these, coercive control stories before. I like that this was a little bit different. And I also appreciated the insight from the host, although I felt like I wish it had come sooner, only so that I could have the context, of like what to sort of be listening for when I hear this story. They had good access, and I think they, essentially took this story as far as they could. So I think that while this may not be super groundbreaking, because we have had stories about different kinds of cults and different kinds of cult-like situations, I still think this is worth a download to go through. So I am a thumbs up for Dangerous Memories.
I am a mild thumbs up for this podcast. I think it's well made. Stories well told. Access is good. I always like getting inside a posh house. But more like Laura, I'm a little more in the who cares camp on this one. I found myself wondering again and again, like, aren't these people going to be fine no matter what? And, these stories are interesting, but some of the more interesting bits of it and the sort of stakes of it came really late. They came really late. And I felt like I needed more of that earlier to care more. And that's all I'm going to say about it. So I'm a mild thumbs up because of story structure problems I had with Dangerous Memories. All right, now it's time for my favorite part of the podcast, a little something I like to call the Crime of the Week. AI has shaken up the creative world, rendering fake photos and videos as easily as it writes term papers in seconds. But now Google has unveiled a feature that will not only summarize long-form content like books and provide analysis, it will create an audio track of two people talking about it. Google isn't using the word podcast, but friends, that's exactly what it is. A writer for Ars Technica fed Google's Notebook LM the book he wrote about the game Minesweeper, and it spit out a 12-minute conversation between two people who didn't exist.
Imagine you talk for 12 minutes about Minesweeper.
Very slowly.
The format should be familiar to true crime fans. One voice summarized its contents, and the other offered banter and commentary like, "You've got to be kidding me," and "Ooh, tell me more." That does sound familiar. The writer said while he quibbled with some of what the AI thought were the more important points, and the human inflections were sometimes robotic, it's probably still better than shocking, heartbreaking, transformative. Ouch. So panel, artificial intelligence is actually coming for our jobs. What will the AI version of Crime Writers On feature? What do you think, Laura Bricker?
I think we're going to have a talking cat introducing the cat of the week.
Excellent point. What do you think, Toby? What will the AI version of Crime Writers On feature?
It's funny. I was actually talking to somebody about this the other day. I was like, I wonder if we trained AI on all our episodes and then fed in podcasts, like what it would spit out as to how we thought about them.
Beep, beep,
and
beep,
would it be
why
close?
now?
Yeah.
Beep, beep, why
We could do
now?
our voices and everything.
Yeah, sure.
In which case, it would just be exactly like our podcast, except we wouldn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah. What do you think, Kevin?
I think we'd have Russian bot of the week.
Probably. I think my cackle would be a little more measured, a lot more appropriately used, and probably get even more 1-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. All right, that's going to do it for us. Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you on social media and say, hi, I want to hear more about your 30th high school reunion, how can they find you there?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Instagram and Twitter.
What about you, Toby Ball? How can you be found?
Let's see. I'm at TobyBallNH on Twitter and TikTok now, and I am at TobyBall603 on Instagram.
What about you, Kevin? How can you be found?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
And Kevin, you run all the socials for this podcast, right? Where can we be found?
Oh, we're going to be found at Crime Writers On.
And I would say I would follow These Are Their Stories on the socials, TikTok, Instagram. There's some really fun These Are Their Stories reels, right, Kevin?
Yeah, there are.
All right, you can follow us everywhere, Crime Writers On. You can follow me at Reb Lavoie everywhere. I encourage you to join our incredible Facebook group. Go to Facebook and look for Crime Writers On, and then join our group. We'll let you in if you seem nice. It's honestly an awesome group. Get episodes early and ad-free at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. You get all the other stuff we make back there. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our editor is the terrific Livy Burdett. The executive producer of this show is Kevin Flynn, who's dressed very dapper today, even though he works at home. It's kind of incredible. This show was recorded in Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where we also spent our formative years flitting around European art schools in search of direction. On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later. Ta!
Yeah, I'm going to listen on the way. Apparently it's 3 hours to Whitehall, New York.
Yeah, I guess it depends on how you go. But I think you go up to like Queegee and then Bangor West and go on Route 4.
That looked like the most direct
fascinating
route past
content.
Killington.
This is Route Talk.
Yeah, that's because we used to go when I lived in Syracuse. That's how we'd go to Meredith. Is we'd go
right,
through Whitehall, and you know what they've got in Whitehall? This is what our fucking listeners want, Rebecca.
Keep talking.
There
Keep talking. I have an
used to
observation
be
about
an
this.
A&W root beer drive-through in Whitehall.
Oh, sweet.
Oh, yeah.
So
They
you
got
might
all
be
those
able
in
to hit
Canada.
that.
I can get a root beer float.
Yes, I don't know if it's still there, but it once was.
Partners in Crime Media.
Lemon, lime, and a drop of cherry make a simple Shirley. But what happens when Tito's handmade vodka reveals this sweet sipper's dirty secret? Stir up a Tito's Dirty Sherlock and crack the case with Tito's at Tito'sVodka.com. 40% alcohol by volume, namely 80 proof, crafted to be savored responsibly.